What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. If you've been following the channel or any social media channel over the last little while, you'll notice they've been talking a lot about Tamara Lich, Chris Barber, and what's going on with the longest mischief trial in history. In fact, mischief is often misrepresented as a major crime when, in fact, it's usually reserved for minimal acts in terms of petty theft, spray painting on a wall, throwing eggs at somebody's house, etc. The thing about mischief is that it's the only grounds in which any prosecution stood on in order to press charges against Chris Barber and Tamara Lich. It's really blown out of proportion. I've covered on the channel numerous times how the federal government is now making an attempt to absolve Big Red, Chris Barber's truck, from him, to dismantle it, because why keep a symbolism of the Freedom Convoy alive and well? And what's funny about the truck is that he's actually sold it to his son in order for his son to maintain his business while he's overgoing the longest mischief trial of all time. Federal government doesn't care. It comes down to, well, we're going to take the truck anyways, because, well, you don't actually own anything that you think you own. We're the government. We can do whatever we want. As the trial is about to conclude in October, they're now saying that October 7th, I believe it is when we should hear a final verdict, the end of the trial. And not really a verdict, sorry, a sentencing when it comes to the fate of Chris and Tamara. Now, the Crown is seeking 8 years for Chris Barber, 7 years for Tamara. I think it's inevitable that we're going to see some form of jail time. It boils down to how bad is it going to be? I wanted to highlight an article that Mrs. Fringe sent me from the National Post. Article clearly points out, from unalivings to SA, the heinous crimes that could get you less jail time than a Freedom Convoy organizer. It's funny that they point all this out, because one thing that Pierre Poilievre has been campaigning on is jail, not bail. In fact, those who commit the biggest crimes in our country are arrested and then out on bail, and they don't go to prison. But if you're white, if you're a Canadian citizen, and if you organize a protest, well, it's all over for you. Let's take a look at this article. Last week, Crown prosecutors announced they are seeking jail sentences for up to 8 years for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, two organizers of the Freedom Convoy protest. Both were convicted of mischief, so that is definite. But the Crown is seeking a minimum sentence of 7 years in jail for Tamara Lich and 8 years for Chris Barber, who was also found guilty of counseling others to disobey a court order. Now, that is just a matter of perspective. When you look at his TikTok videos or any of his tweets, sarcasm can often be misrepresented. But it goes on to say that the Crown has argued that the disruptiveness of the Freedom Convoy blockades warrants the harsh sentence, but in a statement this week, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said that courts are throwing the book at both of them while simultaneously giving free rein to rampant violent offenders and anti-Semitic rioters. Well, that's the way it is. That's just fact. Finally, Pierre's talking some real common sense. It's certainly the case that you can do an awful lot of heinous things in Canada before a prosecutor would ever think of asking for 7 years. Below, a not at all comprehensive list of things you can do in Canada, and have Crown seek a lighter sentence than the one you're seeking for the organizers of the Freedom Convoy. Essaying a baby. The accused can't be named due to a publication ban, but he's a BC man convicted of doing this awful act to his 1-year-old daughter. Specifically, he rubbed his stuff. We're not going to get into the details, but it resulted in March, the Crown prosecutor sought 5 to 6 years for the man's conviction. Absolutely ridiculous. Using a car filled with pew-pews to ram into Justin Trudeau's house. Defense lawyers for Barber and Lich have argued that the pair were active in keeping the Freedom Convoy peaceful and urging supporters away from violence. Ironically, there is another case from Ottawa area which an anti-mandate demonstrator was much more violent and yet still faced a lighter proposed sentence. Months before the convoy ever got underway, an army reservist, angry about the lockdowns, fired up a car with shovels, smashed through the gates of the official Prime Minister residence, and was stopped as he attempted to approach the residence to arrest then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Everybody remembers that story. The reservist's crimes were much more serious than mischief. He was convicted of several weapons charges and one charge of destruction of property, but the Crown in the case only sought to sentence for 6 years. You can unalive multiple innocent people via drunk driving. When it comes to crimes that remove people from the earth, vehicular manslaughter is routinely among the most lightly punished. There exists only a number of examples in the Canadian driver doing so to somebody through the intention of recklessness and getting off with nothing more than a fine and a brief driving ban. Even in cases where the driver wipes out a whole generation of a family, a 7-year sentence would be considered on the tougher side. Edmonton man Taylor Uremchuk hit a senior couple while driving drunk in 2022. The Crown in this case sought and received a 5-year jail sentence for 2 people, with the sentencing judge declaring it was a strong message. 5 years was also the sentence sought by the Crown in the case of a Newfoundland man who took the wheel after drinking all day in 2019 at a music festival, causing a crash that unalived John and Sarah Lush and seriously injured their daughter and her boyfriend, who were in the back seat. You can stab a man because he told you to stop abusing your girlfriend. Under Canadian law, a convicted bad person. I hate that we have to censor all this stuff, but this is the joys of YouTube. Had to spend at least 10 years in jail. That's the mandatory minimum sentence for second degree unaliving. Nevertheless, it's common to see cases in which they receive only a few years in jail simply because what they committed is prosecuted as manslaughter. In 2018, 26-year-old Abil Nurgiz Abera received fatal wounds in downtown Vancouver after he attempted to intervene between a man yelling at his common-law spouse. "Yo, bro, she's just a girl. You don't have to treat her like that. Calm down," he repeatedly said before Benny Ray Armstrong plunged the blade into his chest. At a hearing last month, Crown prosecutors sought a 5-year jail term for Armstrong. So 5 years for losing your temper at a coffee shop and removing somebody from the face of the earth. Not because you spoke out about tyranny of the government. Being a police officer who stalks and SAs crime victims. Edmonton Police Constable Hunter Robbins was convicted earlier this year, not just for SA crimes, but for crimes against vulnerable women he would track down using his status as a police officer, sometimes forcing himself on the women while in uniform. In one instance, Robbins returned to a distressed and intoxicated woman to her apartment only to spend 2 hours attempting to grope and SA her while ignoring calls from the police radio. The Crown sought 2 to 3 years. So less than half of what Tamara and Chris are receiving. Judge opted instead for 6 months because he wore a badge? Amassing enough child inappropriate materials to fill a video store. Joshua Stair's collection was tailed up by police containing 7,170 videos and 1,148 images. At trial, the judge said that the images were so graphic, violent, and disturbing, she occasionally urged lawyers not to detail their contents so as to spare court staff members. The ages of the victim depicted in the images were from age 4 to 12. The Crown sought 3 to 3.5 years, and he was sentenced to 2. Like, this is torturing a toddler, firing at the police, intentionally ramming a car loaded with children and pregnant women, beating a fellow homeless shelter resident to the point that he's no longer here, essaying a minor and bragging about it online. Like, these are all things that resorted in less time, less jail than what Chris Barber and Tamara Leach are looking at. What's being proposed by the Crown. If this doesn't tell you in great detail with factual backings how corrupt and how disdained our political system is, our judicial system outside of it, This is disgusting. We live in a country where the government has endless resources with our tax dollars to jail 2 people who simply drove a truck to Ottawa, amongst thousands of others, parked them on the street, and asked for the government to talk to them. They're going to get 7 to 8 years in jail, recommended. And like I said, in most of these cases, you'll see the judge says, well, we'll give them a little less. My guess is there's going to be jail time for both of them. I know it's try to think positive, but when you look at the way the court has handled things, do you really think we're going to see anything less? I, for one, while I have spoken to Tamara, while I've been told she's in good spirits by her, I still fear for what they'll have to face. But Chris Barber and Tamara Lich essentially about to become political prisoners in Canada based off of a flawed and biased judicial system. Let me know what you guys think down below. If it's your first time here, I hope this video's earned your subscription. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, a thumbs up, a comment. It all helps us right now, folks. YouTube is clamping down on this stuff, so make sure to join us on the channel. Speaking of joining us, turn on your bell for all notifications. Join me live each and every Wednesday and Friday for Unhinged Fringe on Wednesdays, Friday Night Fringe on Fridays, where co-hosts on both shows. We talk about everything that happened this week in politics, everything we know coming up in the weeks ahead, as well as Q&A and back and forth within the greatest YouTube community on the platform. I look forward to chatting with you guys each and every week on those shows. I most importantly look forward to chatting with you this week on both shows starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central here on the channel. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.